Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where Reddit drama gets real. And today is wild. We've got 21 AITA stories that spiral so fast you'll feel like you're eavesdropping on the world's most dysfunctional group chat. We're talking a daughter who calls her own mother a mistress, a boyfriend who expects his girlfriend to pay for everyone's dinner on his birthday, a woman uninvited from a wedding just for losing weight. Yep, you heard that right. And a dad's girlfriend who thought she could put a grown adult to bed. Seriously. From delusional in-laws to messy breakups and full-blown family implosions, this lineup is dripping in chaos. You'll laugh, you'll yell, "No way." And at least once, you'll probably pause the video just to send a timestamp to your best friend. So whether you're washing dishes, doom scrolling through Reddit, or just hiding from your own family's drama, this is your sign to sit back and stay a while. Because trust me, you're going to want to hear every single one of these 21 insane stories. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. We're climbing toward 10K subscribers. And you clicking that button helps this channel more than you know. All right, let's get into it. 21 shocking AITA stories, cheaters, toxic families, and insane betrayals revealed. Let's go. Am I the asshole for telling my mom she's nothing but a mistress? Sometimes the people we love the most are the hardest to watch fall apart. This story begins with a daughter, our writer, grappling with something far more painful than any family argument or misunderstanding. She's watching her mother, now in her early 60s, walk straight into a situation that looks less like love and more like manipulation. But before we get there, let's rewind. 4 years ago, the writer's father passed away. He was significantly older than her mother, 18 years her senior. For the last 5 years of his life, her mom had stepped into the role of caregiver. She'd been by his side through illness, through the quiet heartbreak of watching a partner fade. And then came Bob, a man who appeared at first as a second chance. Someone her mom met through Facebook dating while her husband was still alive. The timeline is already questionable. And that shadow, it never quite left. Now, after just 6 months of dating, Bob moved in. No job, no driver's license, no stability, but plenty of baggage. Serious health issues kept him from working, so the financial responsibility fell entirely on the mom. A woman approaching retirement, still grieving, now carrying someone else, fully. But that's not the part that broke the writer. That came later. Because Bob didn't come to Canada alone. He brought over his entire family from another country, his wife and 3 older children. Yes, you heard that right. His wife, not ex-wife, not estranged partner, his wife. And according to him, there was nothing romantic there, just a family he was helping get settled. The writer's mom knew. She knew this family was coming, but she told herself it didn't mean anything. Let's pause here. Can we just take a moment and imagine what kind of heartbreak it must be to watch your own mother rationalize this? To see her buy into the idea that the man she's supporting emotionally and financially isn't still committed to his wife, even though he moved in with her and their kids? The denial is louder than words, because Bob didn't just move them in. He left. He moved out of the writer's mom's house to live in an apartment with his wife and children, told her it was temporary, just for a few months. It's been nearly a year, and he never moved back. But somehow the strings stayed attached. Bob and the mom opened a small store together at the local mall, selling goods from his home country. A venture that sounds more symbolic than profitable. And who runs the store? Not Bob. The writer's mom. A woman nearing retirement who already has a full-time job. Now she's giving up evenings and weekends, grinding herself into the ground while Bob plays happy family in another home. No affection, no intimacy, no sign that this relationship even exists in Bob's world anymore. Yet her mom clings to it like a lifeline. And that's when the writer, watching this mess unfold day after day, finally breaks. She doesn't sugarcoat it, she doesn't tiptoe, she tells her mom the truth as she sees it. You're nothing but a mistress. A known mistress, a cash cow that his wife is kind enough to tolerate. Harsh? Maybe. But is it cruel or just brutally honest? The writer isn't just speaking from anger. She's speaking from fear. Fear that this twisted dynamic is draining her mother not just financially, but emotionally and mentally. That this man has hollowed her out and replaced love with labor, respect with manipulation. And now she's asking, am I the asshole for calling it what it is, for pulling back the curtain on a situation that everyone else seems to be ignoring? But here's the painful truth, the truth that makes this so deeply human. Sometimes people don't want to be rescued. Sometimes even when you show them the fire, they'll swear it's just a warm glow. And for the writer, that's the most heartbreaking part. She sees her mom drowning in delusion. She knows this can't end well, and yet if she pushes too hard, she risks being shut out entirely. So the question becomes, does she keep trying to wake her mom up, or does she let her sleepwalk into the inevitable crash? This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's a story about love, twisted, one-sided, and painfully misplaced. It's about a daughter who sees her mother as worth so much more, but who can't make her believe it. So, is the writer the asshole for what she said? No, she's human, she's hurt, she's terrified, and maybe, just maybe, someone needed to say it out loud, because silence would have meant complicity, and pretending everything's fine would have been the real betrayal. What do you think? Should the writer back off and let her mother live in the fantasy? Or did this woman need to hear a little truth, however brutal, to snap out of a situation that's bleeding her dry? Let us know. Am I the asshole for telling my neighbor I have no desire or obligation to babysit her children just because I'm a stay-at-home mom? Let's set the scene. You're new to town, new mom, 9 weeks postpartum, new life, new state, new everything. And as if becoming a mom overnight isn't already a seismic shift, you're still trying to find your footing, emotionally, physically, socially. That's the writer's reality. She's just entered one of the most transformative, exhausting, and vulnerable chapters of her life. So she did what many new moms do. She joined a Mommy and Me group to find community, connection, maybe even a few friendships keep the isolation at bay. And for a while, it seemed like a good decision. The group was supportive, the other moms were relatable, but then cue the neighbor. This particular neighbor was also in the group, and one day, in what appeared to be a genuine emergency, she asked the writer for help. Could she watch her 3- and 5-year-old children? She looked desperate, pleading, and the writer, being kind-hearted and new, agreed. She thought, okay, just this once. Now pause right there. That moment, that first yes, it's what I call the crack in the dam. That's where people test your boundaries. And the problem with being a kind person, especially as a woman and especially as a mother, is that people assume your kindness is infinite, that it's not a favor, it's a job description. So that just once turned into 6 hours of chaos. Her newborn was fussy, her neighbor's kids were wild, and the day felt like an avalanche of overstimulation and exhaustion. Let's not forget, this isn't a mom of a toddler with years of parenting under her belt. This is a mom of a 9-week-old infant. She's still recovering from birth, still figuring out how to soothe her own baby, let alone someone else's. Fast forward, the neighbor returns, not to say thank you and move on, but with a proposal. She wants the writer to start watching her kids every afternoon, like it's a scheduled arrangement. The writer says no, and not rudely. She sets a firm but respectful boundary. She's not a babysitter. She's a stay-at-home mom, yes, but to her own child. Her husband works from home and the house needs to be quiet. She's still adjusting to motherhood. She's still adjusting to everything. This isn't a season in her life where she can carry someone else's load. And that's when the neighbor flips. She says it's not a lot to ask, that the writer is being selfish. Now let's stop right there. Selfish? Since when is protecting your time, your peace, your baby, and your marriage selfish? Since when does staying home with your child make you the neighborhood nanny? This isn't an entitlement. It's her home, her schedule, her life. The writer pushes back, gracefully but firmly. She tells the neighbor it's entitled of her to expect free childcare just because someone is home during the day. And really, where's the logic? Just because someone has a kitchen doesn't mean they're a chef for hire. Just because someone has a spare room doesn't mean they're running a hotel. But in motherhood, there's this dangerous assumption that if you're not working a 9-to-5, then you're just available. But it gets worse. The neighbor takes it to the group chat. Publicly, she tries to disparage the writer, painting her as selfish, cold, unwilling to help another mom out, and it could have gone badly. It could have turned the whole group against her. But then, something kind of amazing happened. The other moms spoke up. One mom asked, "Why would you feel the SAHMs in the group are obligated to watch your kids?" Another reminded everyone that the same neighbor had tried this exact move before, that she'd tried to pressure her into babysitting too. And just like that, the narrative shifted. The truth came out, and then came the final nail. The group's moderator stepped in. Told the neighbor maybe this group isn't the right fit for her. Told her that if she ever tries this again, she'll be removed from the group. That's when the backtracking began. The apologies. But the damage? It was done. Behind the scenes, the moderator reached out to the writer personally, told her she was supported, told her that what happened wasn't okay, that the group had her back, and in a moment where she could have been shamed or isolated, she was validated. Now, here's the part that hit me the hardest. The writer opened up and shared that just a year ago, she was a college student, hanging out with her fiancé, living a life that probably felt light and full of freedom. Now, she's married, she's a mom, she's in a new town, she's building a whole new identity while trying to hold on to the pieces of who she used to be. And honestly, that is so real. She's not just protecting her boundaries, she's trying to survive motherhood, to adapt, to grow, to heal. And being told she's selfish for not wanting to become someone else's unpaid caregiver in the middle of that, that's not just insulting, it's erasing the complexity of what she's going through. So, am I the asshole for saying no, for refusing to let someone else's needs hijack her life, for choosing her own child, her own family first? Because if that's being selfish, maybe more moms need to be. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was the writer right to hold her ground, or should she have helped another mom out? Or maybe the real question is, when did help stop being voluntary and start being expected? Am I the asshole for losing weight for my friend's wedding, even though I'm already the skinny friend? Friendship is supposed to be about support, loyalty, knowing that someone's got your back through glow-ups, breakups, and even bridesmaid dress fittings. But sometimes friendship isn't what we thought it was. Sometimes it hides jealousy in a smile, and sometimes it explodes over something as simple and personal as loss. The writer, a 28-year-old woman, shares that she recently lost a fair bit of weight. Not for anyone else, not for a spotlight or attention or applause. She did it for herself, for her health, her comfort, her confidence, but she also did it with a deadline in mind, her best friend's wedding, a goal she could look forward to, a reason to stay consistent. And really, that's pretty normal. Who doesn't want to feel their best when standing next to their best friend at one of the most photographed events of their life? Let's rewind a bit. Emily, the bride-to-be, got engaged at the end of last year and asked the writer to be a bridesmaid. And of course, the writer said yes, because when your best friend asks you to stand by her side, you do it. No hesitation. In the past few years, the writer had gained some weight, 2 dress sizes. It wasn't a crisis, it didn't define her. But she wanted a change, and the wedding gave her a natural starting line. She didn't crash diet. She didn't make a spectacle out of it. She just quietly made changes for herself. And here's the thing. She didn't think she needed permission to change her body. But then came the dress shopping trip, a moment that should have been fun. Bonding, champagne sipping, laughing over satin versus chiffon. But instead, Emily's vibe shifted. Funny looks, cold responses, talking over her, and sometimes you can just feel when someone's treating you differently. You can feel when a wall's gone up and you don't even know why. At the end of the appointment, the writer tried to do what any best friend would do. She reached out, invited her over like they always did, but Emily just scoffed, and then came the explosion. The accusations hit like ice water. Emily accused her of trying to upstage her on her wedding day, said she was already the skinny friend and now she was doing too much. She said the writer was being deceitful by wearing oversized clothes to hide the weight loss, as if being comfortable was some kind of plot. And worst of all, she said the writer never cleared the weight loss with her. Imagine hearing that you needed approval to change your body, that your friend is keeping a mental tally of your dress size, that your self-improvement is somehow a threat to her big day. And here's where it gets heavy. The writer wasn't even trying to take any spotlight. She's not the kind to seek attention. She wasn't flaunting anything or showing up to fittings in tight dresses. She just wanted to feel good, to fit into a bridesmaid dress and not feel self-conscious. And now she's wondering, was she wrong for not saying anything? Was she supposed to have a conversation about losing weight? Let's pause here. Since when do we need to ask permission to take care of ourselves? Now here's where this story goes from sad to wild. Because yes, there's an update, and it does not go the way anyone hoped. The writer, away for work, called Emily to try and clear the air. She explained that her weight loss journey had actually started before the engagement, that she wasn't trying to upstage her, and asked plainly, "Do you really think I'd be that vindictive?" But instead of softening, Emily snapped. She accused the writer of thinking she's better than her. She vented years of bottled up insecurity, said that whenever they go out, people only look at the writer, never at her. Which, by the way, the writer doesn't even believe. She says Emily is beautiful. She doesn't even see herself as particularly striking. And then, the plot twist that feels like something out of a soap opera. Emily reveals that her ex-boyfriend, yes, the one who's now married, will be at the wedding. And apparently, at one point, he was thinking about leaving his fiancée to ask the writer out. But Emily, her best friend, talked him out of it. Let's just take a breath here. The writer had no idea this was happening. No clue this man was interested. No idea Emily was playing some behind-the-scenes emotional chess match. And if you're connecting the dots, so is the writer. This isn't about the wedding dress, or the photos, or the bridesmaid dress. This is about a long, slow-burning resentment. A friend who was never fully okay with how people looked at the writer. A friend who might still be in love with her ex. And a friend who, in the middle of all that tangled emotion, made the writer the villain of her story. And the final blow? Emily uninvites her from the wedding. But wait, it gets worse. She says the writer can only attend if she puts the weight back on. Not as a bridesmaid, of course, just as a guest, just quietly present. Let's call that what it is, emotional. So the writer said no, she's not going. And now, that weight loss has a new meaning. Not just a number on the scale, but a symbol of freedom. Freedom from toxic friendships, from being guilt-tripped, from shrinking herself, literally and emotionally, to keep other people comfortable. The truth? This was never about weight, it was about control. About one friend's deep-rooted insecurity and the other friend's quiet glow-up finally pulling that thread too tight. So, is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. She didn't upstage a wedding. She exposed a friendship that was already broken. She made a personal choice, and someone else projected their fears onto it. That's not her burden to carry. Sometimes when you start bettering yourself, people show you who they really are. And as painful as that is, it's also a gift. Because now, the writer knows, and she's walking away lighter in more ways than one. Am I the asshole for refusing to give any of my late mom's jewelry to my dad's fiancée or their daughters? This one runs deeper than diamonds and gold. This is about memory, grief, boundaries, and the invisible threads that tie us to the people we've lost. The writer, a 26-year-old woman, lost her mother when she was just 12 years old. Imagine the gravity of that. At an age where most of us are trying to survive middle school, she was navigating the chasm of losing the most foundational figure in her life. 3 years after her mom's passing, at 15, her dad handed her all of her mother's things. But it wasn't out of nowhere. It happened after an ex-girlfriend of his crossed a line, a big one. This woman tried to take some of the mom's belongings for herself, like they were just up for grabs. The writer, a teenager still raw from loss, stood up to her. She yelled. The woman tried to slap her. Yes, slap her. And her father, to his credit in that moment, ended things with the woman. That wasn't even the first time someone tried to claim pieces of the past that weren't theirs. Even his sister once tried to steal a pearl pendant that belonged to the writer's mom. Clearly, sentiment doesn't always bring out the best in people. But here's the thing. The dad had told the writer that her mom wanted all of her belongings to go to her daughter. That was her wish, and he respected it, at least back then. After that, the writer packed everything up and sent it to her grandparents, tucking it away like a time capsule of love, memory, and everything sacred that remained of her mother. Then came the fiancée. The dad met her when the writer was 17, and the connection? Non-existent, cold, distant. Whatever hope he had that they'd bond, it never bloomed. By 18, the writer moved out. Meanwhile, the dad started a new chapter. Marriage on the horizon, 5 children with his new partner, and a whole new life she was never quite invited into. Fast forward. The wedding is coming up, February 2026. And now, after years of silence and emotional distance, her dad wants pieces of her mother's jewelry to give away, as if they're party favors, as if these weren't the last physical echoes of the woman who raised her. He wants to give his fiancée a claddagh ring that her mother got in her teens. Sentimental, personal, sacred. Then he wants to give their oldest daughter a wedding necklace he bought for her mom. Again, highly symbolic. The younger daughter would get a bracelet. And just for good measure, he says the fiancé loves a watch the mom owned and suggests the writer gift it to her as a wedding gift because, that would make her feel welcome. That's when the writer drew a hard, clear line. No. No hesitation. No half measures. No politeness to soften the blow. Just no. And honestly, can you blame her? Her father tried to reason with her, said it would be the right thing to do, said it would show that they're one big family. But here's where it gets hard to swallow. Her mom wasn't their family. She was his past, the writer's blood. And just because there's a new family now doesn't mean the past becomes a communal property. When she held her ground, the fiancé stepped in, asked what kind of daughter the writer was being to her. Yes, to her, a woman 12 years older, said the kids deserved something from the mom's collection, that it would make them feel like a real family. And then, just like that, she made it about herself, that she deserved the claddagh ring more than the wedding ring itself. That's when the writer laid it out. Cold, hard truth. The ring, hers. The collection, hers. And none of it was going to the fiancé or the kids. Then came the guilt trip. Her dad sent a long text saying he hopes she reconsiders for his sake, that it's breaking his heart, that he's caught in the middle. But here's the thing people forget. Grief doesn't disappear because someone remarries. And respect doesn't mean erasing someone's legacy to make room for new narratives. These aren't just objects. They're memories wrapped in gold. They're pieces of a woman the writer barely got enough time with. And now people who never knew her, never loved her, never even tried to know the writer, are asking for keepsakes like souvenirs. So, am I the asshole? Because she stood her ground? Because she protected what little she has left of her mother? Because she didn't want to hand over sacred heirlooms to people who aren't part of that legacy? Some may say sharing would be kind, that it's just jewelry. But to anyone who's really known loss, it's never just about the objects. It's about keeping something, anything, from slipping away. Would love to hear your take in the comments. Is the writer holding on to grief too tightly, or is she right to guard these memories with both hands? Am I the asshole for not punishing my son after he made fun of his little sister for wetting her pants? Let's rewind. The house is full of birthday excitement. Your son, 10 years old, is on cloud 9, unwrapping gifts and discovering that the one game he'd been dreaming about, Dying Light, is now finally his. A zombie game. Intense, graphic, terrifying for most adults, let alone kids. But to a 10-year-old boy obsessed with monsters and gore, it's paradise. He dives into it, wide-eyed and thrilled. Meanwhile, his 7-year-old sister, curious and innocent, walks downstairs into the living room. Just as fate would have it, she steps in right at the wrong moment. The game flashes a jump scare, grotesque and sudden. Her little mind, still soft and trusting, can't process what she sees. Her body reacts before her brain can catch up, and she pees her pants. Right there, in front of her big brother. Now, this is where things start to fracture. Instead of comforting her or even staying silent, her brother laughs, loud, sharp, cruel in that unfiltered way only children can be. Ah, you peed yourself. You're a big baby. He didn't whisper it. He didn't hide it. He mocked her. And in that instant, her embarrassment swallowed her whole. The writer hears the commotion, rushes in, and finds her daughter tear-streaked and soaked in shame. She gently asks what happened. Her daughter, still shaking, explains in that broken little voice kids use when they feel betrayed. "The monsters scared me." So what does the writer do? She doesn't yell. She doesn't scold. She takes her daughter upstairs and comforts her, because in that moment, her instinct wasn't to discipline, it was to protect. But then comes the fallout. Her husband returns home, sees their daughter upset, and asks what happened. The writer fills him in, expecting maybe a nod of understanding or agreement that it was all just a messy little moment of childhood. But instead, he's furious. Why? Because their son wasn't punished. To the husband, this wasn't just some brother-sister teasing. This was bullying, humiliation, a moment where a vulnerable little girl needed protection and didn't get it. He felt like the writer had failed to set a boundary, and worse, now if he steps in to discipline the boy, he becomes the bad guy. And you know what? That's not a ridiculous take, because when you raise siblings, you're not just raising individuals, you're shaping how they'll treat each other for life. The habits they form now, they're the ones that carry into adulthood. That comment from the son wasn't just mean. It reinforced a dynamic where teasing is okay, where laughter comes before empathy, where his sister's fear is a joke instead of a cue for kindness. But here's where it gets real. The writer acknowledges her mistake. She apologizes to her husband. She reflects. She doesn't double down or try to justify her actions. She realizes that yes, she should have addressed it. She should have told her son that what he said was wrong, that his sister didn't just embarrass herself for fun. She was terrified. So they sit him down together and talk to him. No shouting, no lectures, just honest parenting. They explain what happened from his sister's perspective, how she felt, and they ask him to imagine how he'd feel if the roles were reversed. And then something really touching happens. He gets it. He doesn't just apologize, he wraps his sister in a hug, kisses the top of her head, and says he's sorry the game scared her. Not because they told him to, but because he meant it. That's growth. That's empathy. That's parenting done right. They make adjustments. From now on, he can only play that game in his room, away from his sister. He agrees without resistance, because now he understands the impact. And then, to close this chapter with love, they make their daughter's favorite meal. Breakfast for dinner, pancakes with peanut butter, hot syrup, and crispy hash browns on the side. That small gesture says, you matter too. It wasn't about favoritism, it was about healing, about recentering a child who, for a few hours, felt overlooked and humiliated. So now we circle back to the big question. Am I the asshole for not punishing my son right away for making fun of his sister? Let's be honest. Yes, the writer made a misstep. In that moment, she should have said something. She should have let her son know that what he did wasn't okay. Not because he's a bad kid, but because he's still learning. That's what parenting is. Not perfection, but correction. And the sooner you make those tiny corrections, the better you set your kids up for future empathy. But, and this is important, the writer recognized the mistake, took accountability, and fixed it with love, with understanding. She didn't dig her heels in or throw her husband under the bus. She made it a shared solution. And because of that, no, the writer is not the asshole. She's just a parent figuring it out. And in the end, the son learned, the daughter was comforted, and the family came out stronger. That's the stuff that matters. So what do you think? Was it wrong to let that moment slide at first, or is it more important that the son understood and made it right? Drop your thoughts below. Am I the asshole for refusing to apologize to my mother-in-law after saying fuck this and walking out of her house? All right, picture this. You've been married for 8 years. You've spent over a decade building a life with your partner. You've got 2 kids, a strong marriage, a happy home, the kind of foundation most people hope for. And importantly, your family, supportive, loving, close-knit. They welcome your husband like one of their own. But on the other side of that picture stands your mother-in-law. In the beginning, she was kind, polite, even warm. But something shifted the moment the writer and her husband dared to, God forbid, move 17 minutes away. Not 17 hours, not even across the country, 17 minutes. That's not a relocation. That's a grocery store detour. And yet, from that moment on, the air changed. Coldness, passive aggression, that frosty silence that only someone who's pretending to be civil can weaponize. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign, and not a quiet one. Let's go down the list, shall we? Ignored the writer and her family on their wedding day. Not just a missed gift, a total snub. When their 9-week-old baby was in the ICU on a ventilator, the husband asked her to get updates from the writer. Her response? Who? Like the mother of her grandchild was some stranger off the street. Years without birthday or Christmas gifts. Then one year, she tosses over a half-used airline toiletry bag, already opened, like a token of contempt, wrapped in passive disdain. Called the writer an unfit mother on Facebook, publicly. Said she had no career, even though she's a university lecturer finishing a PhD. A PhD. Let's just sit with that for a second. Imagine putting in all those hours, building an academic life, raising a family, doing it all, and having someone deliberately reduce you to nothing just to soothe their own bitterness. And the kids? She doesn't try, doesn't show up. The last time she took them out, the daughter was still in a pram. The bond isn't just weak, it's non-existent. Not from lack of opportunity, but lack of effort. Meanwhile, the writer's husband is embraced by her family. Holidays, barbecues, drinks with her dad. He has what she never gave, acceptance. That's got a sting, for the mother-in-law, sure, but instead of reflecting, she retaliates with jealousy, with manipulation, even down to the clothes. The writer has a distinct Western style, cowboy boots, fringe jackets, the whole look. It's bold, unique. But suddenly, after decades of dressing a certain way, the mother-in-law is a walking mirror, copying outfits, mimicking the vibe, and it's not admiration, it's invasion. But the tipping point? It wasn't the years of silent treatment, the cold shoulders, or the Facebook jabs. No, it was one evening, the night before the writer's family holiday. They dropped by her house with gifts and cards, still trying to keep things civil, still showing up. And that's when she picked a fight. Out of nowhere. Accused the writer of not treating her husband's sister as real family because they skipped a last-minute piss-up to attend the writer's cousin's 30th. A party that had been planned for 6 months. A family-friendly event. Their kids were invited. The choice wasn't petty, it was practical. But the mother-in-law didn't want practicality. She wanted a reason to lash out. And finally, after 9 years of biting her tongue, the writer hit her limit. She stood up, looked around at the cold, toxic air she'd endured far too long and said, "Fuck this," and walked out. No screaming, no slamming doors, just a raw, honest breaking point. And here's the kicker. Now, the mother-in-law wants an apology. Now, she's the wounded party. Like she was the victim in all this. As if those 9 years of biting her tongue never happened. As if the verbal cruelty, the erasure, the gaslighting was some kind of misunderstanding. But even more telling, the husband hasn't spoken to her since. His own siblings, their reaction wasn't shock. It was, what's she done now? That says everything. This isn't new behavior. It's just finally being confronted. So now we land at the big question. Am I the asshole for refusing to apologize after finally saying fuck this and walking out of her house? Not even close. This wasn't a tantrum. This was the sound of a woman hitting her breaking point after nearly a decade of silent disrespect. This was a boundary being drawn, not with aggression, but with finality. And frankly, she deserved it. You can only take so much before something inside you says, I'm done making myself small to keep someone else comfortable. That's not being an asshole. That's being human. And the fact that the writer has never blown up before, that tells you just how much she's endured in silence. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a release. One long overdue. Verdict? The writer is not the asshole. She's just someone who finally stood up for herself when no one else would. And if anything, maybe it's time the mother-in-law got used to the silence. Because if she can't show respect, she shouldn't expect access. What do you think? 9 years of quiet tolerance and one honest moment of walking away. Was it justified? Or should apologies be handed out even when they're undeserved? Let us know. Am I the asshole if I turn down my ex's settlement offer and force him out of his home? Let's start at the heart of this story. A marriage ends. Two people who once promised each other everything are now tangled up in the cold machinery of divorce. But this isn't just a sad story of a relationship that didn't work. No, this is deeper. This is about broken promises, delayed justice, and one woman, the writer, left waiting far too long for what she's owed. She's 32. Her ex-husband, 38. Older, supposedly wiser, and during the divorce proceedings, the terms were clear. He would pay her $250,000 for her share of their marital home. They had both put in $100K to buy that house, equal stake, equal investment. So it wasn't a gift, it wasn't generosity, it was fairness. And yet here we are, years later, $250,000 promised, $210,000 delivered, and the remaining $40,000 nowhere to be seen. He had a deadline, June of last year, a legally binding agreement that wasn't just scribbled on the back of a napkin, it was signed in court. But the money didn't come. When the writer reached out for an update in December, all she got was a shrug. No plan, no deadline, just uncertainty and avoidance. But even that wasn't the final insult. Her ex tells her to pick up the last of her belongings from the storage shed at the old house. She says she'll be back after the holidays. His response? No. Get it before January 1st. He draws a line in the sand, knowing full well she has travel plans to see her family. So what does the writer do? She cancels her trip. She sacrifices seeing her loved ones over Christmas just to prevent another escalation. But it's already too late, because on Christmas morning, she wakes up to find the things she didn't retrieve smashed, destroyed, dumped on the street like garbage, with a hammer, no less, a literal act of violence toward the last pieces of her former life. And that was the final straw. She contacts her lawyer, files contempt charges, enough of the waiting, the delays, the passive-aggressive power plays. Her ex didn't just violate the financial terms, he broke the spirit of the agreement. So now she's suing for interest, legal fees, and damages, as she damn well should. His response? A settlement offer. Everything she's asking for, but in 6 months. He'll even return some of the things he didn't destroy, which frankly is rich. Like returning fragments of someone's life makes up for smashing the rest. But here's the catch. If the writer declines the offer, the clock runs out. He'll have 30 days to sell the house to pay her. And this isn't just any house. This is his house. The one he clings to, the one he's emotionally attached to, the one he has said without shame that he wants to die in. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the writer hesitates. Because even though he's dragged this divorce out for years, ducking service, skipping court, requesting delay after delay, there's still a part of her that wonders, am I doing this out of hate? Because if we're being honest, it would feel good to make him finally feel the weight of his own choices, to force him to sell that beloved house and watch the consequences of his selfishness finally hit home. But the writer is not a spiteful person. She's exhausted. She's been patient. She's tried to do this the right way, again and again. And now she's left with a question that only those who've been wronged this deeply can truly understand. Would I be the asshole if I finally chose justice over mercy? Because this isn't about money anymore. Not really. It's about accountability. This man has danced around consequences for years, and the one thing he truly cares about, that house, could finally be the thing that makes him realize that when you break agreements, when you ignore the court, when you smash someone's memories with a hammer, there's a cost. So now the writer stands at a crossroads. Accept the deal. Wait another 6 months. Hope he follows through this time, because let's not forget, he already didn't once, or decline it. Force the sale. Get what's owed now, not someday. And maybe more importantly, show him that legally binding doesn't mean optional when convenient. Would the writer be the asshole for saying no? For choosing consequences over yet another delay? Absolutely not. This isn't revenge. This is resolution. And if he didn't want to lose the house, maybe, just maybe, he should have respected the agreement he signed. Because at the end of the day, love doesn't shield you from responsibility, and neither should nostalgia. What do you think? Should the writer give him one last chance to make it right, or is it time he finally faced the full weight of the mess he created? Let us know. Am I the asshole for bringing a meat-based dish to my vegan friend's dinner? Sometimes the drama isn't in the main course. It's simmering just beneath the surface, buried under layers of miscommunication, culture, and unspoken expectations. Our writer, a 22-year-old from Chile, found herself at the heart of one such dish, a moment that turned what should have been a night of shared food and friendship into a quiet storm of tension. Let's set the scene. Her friend Hannah, a 23-year-old vegan, was hosting a massive dinner party, 27 guests in total. Not some cozy four-person meal in a candlelit kitchen. No, this was a full-blown potluck event with more than 20 dishes gracing the table. In her message to the group, Hannah asked everyone to bring plant-based dishes so everyone can try everything. That phrasing, "it would be awesome if," felt more like a suggestion than a strict rule. It wasn't capitalized, underlined, or labeled a policy. And so the writer made a decision that, in her mind, balanced respect with personal tradition. She brought 2 dishes, empanadas de pino, a flavorful meat-filled Chilean classic, and sopaipillas con pebre, a delicious, entirely vegan offering. To be clear, this wasn't careless. She labeled both dishes, made sure everything was clearly marked vegan versus non-vegan. There was no attempt to deceive or sneak anything under the radar. She even ensured there was something Hannah could eat. But that didn't matter. Not to Hannah. When she saw the meat dish on her table, her demeanor shifted. She didn't make a scene. She didn't raise her voice. But later, away from the crowd, she sent a message that carried far more weight than any awkward glance. "It was really disrespectful for you to bring animal products into my home." And that's where the writer found herself stuck between 2 very different truths. Truth number 1, she meant no harm. This wasn't a rebellion or a disrespectful stunt. It was her culture, her identity, her way of sharing something meaningful, something loved. The empanadas were a piece of home. And to her, the host's request felt more like a guideline, not a boundary written in stone. Truth number 2, to Hannah, this was a boundary. Maybe it wasn't phrased like a command, but it was a heartfelt request rooted in her values, in her lifestyle, in her home, and the presence of meat, no matter how neatly labeled or tastefully arranged, felt like a violation. And that's the core of this story, isn't it? It's not just about veganism. It's about respect and whether intention outweighs interpretation. Let's be honest. Our writer didn't bring a steak and wave it around shouting, "Meat forever." She thoughtfully included a vegan dish. She clearly labeled both options, and this wasn't some sacred vegan-only space. It was a house where non-vegan food had been eaten before, with no major drama. So, what changed? Was it the size of the event? Was it Hannah trying to redefine her boundaries now that she had 27 people in her home? Was it a misstep in communication on both sides? Here's where the drama really lives, in that gray area between intention and perception. Our writer tried to strike a balance, but in doing so, she unintentionally stepped over a line Hannah assumed everyone understood, and now the guilt creeps in. The writer apologized. She acknowledged Hannah's feelings, but also tried to explain that, in her eyes, the act wasn't disrespectful, just misunderstood. Her dish wasn't meant to offend. It was a way of sharing something personal. And again, she wasn't the only one who brought food. There were over 20 dishes on that table, most of them vegan. No one was forced to eat anything. No rules were broken, just feelings. But here's where it gets real. We're talking about cultural sharing versus personal ethics. And those two don't always blend cleanly. For the writer, empanadas de pino are more than food. They're connection, heritage, identity. For Hannah, a meat-based dish is more than food. It's a symbol of harm, a trigger, a red line. And in that gap lies a very human mess. So now the question, am I the asshole for bringing a meat-based dish to a vegan friend's potluck when I also brought a vegan dish, labeled both, and tried to respect everyone's choices? That's the beauty of this story. It forces us to look beyond food and into the weight of what we bring into each other's spaces, literally and emotionally. No, the writer didn't storm in with bad intentions, but maybe Hannah didn't react out of malice either. Maybe this was just 2 people trying to coexist with different values and learning, painfully, that communication isn't always enough. So, what do you think? Is the writer in the wrong for thinking of her culture first? Or did Hannah expect a level of control over others that she never clearly communicated? Let us know, Because sometimes the biggest tension at the table has nothing to do with what's on your plate. Am I the asshole for making my parents feel guilty about voting for Trump when I'm about to get DOGE'd? Sometimes the weight of politics doesn't come crashing down in a headline or a debate stage. It hits you at the dinner table, in the group chat, or worse, when you're staring down the barrel of a potential layoff with no lifeline in sight. Our writer has been holding it together for 4 years in a job many would call thankless but reliable, the IRS. Not glamorous, not easy, but in an economy that's been yanked in every direction over the last few years, reliability is everything. And lately, that's been cracking. Enter DOGE. Downsizing of government employees, layoffs, departments gutted, security dissolving. The uncertainty doesn't knock, it breaks the door down and settles in your living room. Now, to be clear, Ryder hasn't been laid off yet, but when the air is thick with pink slips and whispers, when the desks around you are emptying out, you feel it coming like a train in the distance. It's not paranoia, it's survival instincts. And for Ryder, that meant doing the logical thing, reaching out to family for help. But instead of practical leads or contacts in hiring positions, what came back was fashion advice. Dress for the job you want. From her dad, a man retired after 40+ years in the workforce, a generation that believed in walking into an office, resume in hand, smile sharp, shoes shined, a world where appearances could open doors. That's the lens he's using, and it's not out of malice, it's out of love. It's his version of, let me help. But here's the thing. Our world isn't built like that anymore. The writer's job isn't just remote, it's bureaucratic, digital, and cutthroat. Dressing up for a Zoom screen or a job where no one sees you isn't going to tip any scales. That era is gone. But for her dad, the advice is love. It's what he knows, it's what he did. And that's why the writer didn't snap. She responded thoughtfully, explaining that the game has changed, and a tie won't save her from budget cuts. And up to this point, there's no drama, just a quiet generational disconnect playing out the way it always does. Until she added a sentence. One sentence. This is what you all voted for, and now it's a bed that I have to lie in. And there it is. That's where the calm breaks. That's where guilt gets handed out like a dish no one asked for. Not because it's untrue, but because it's sharp. Because it's personal. Because even if it's said in a moment of truth, it cuts like blame. Let's not sugarcoat this. Ryder wasn't wrong. This administration brought policies that led to widespread cuts, DOGE included. And while she's working for a government agency, her parents helped put that very government in power with their vote. So yes, their decisions did help shape the circumstances that may now put her out of a job. But was that moment the right time to say it? That's the real storm here. Not the politics, but the guilt that follows truth. Because let's be honest, Ryder wasn't trying to start a debate. She wasn't hoping for an apology or an epiphany. That comment wasn't strategic, it was emotional. It was born from frustration, from fear, from staring at the edge of joblessness and watching her parents shrug it off with suggestions about slacks and shirt collars. And that's what makes this human. This wasn't a calculated attack. It was a pressure valve releasing just a little too hard. And now the guilt lingers. Because Ryder knows she can't change her dad's political beliefs with one sentence. She can't rewrite 4 years of policy with one emotional jab. And making him feel bad won't keep her job. It won't stop DOGE. It won't fix any of this. It just adds pain on top of anxiety. So now we ask the question, am I the asshole for making my parents feel guilty about something that is affecting me, even if I know it won't change anything? This isn't just a post about politics, it's about a daughter standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing she might fall, and realizing the very people who raised her might have helped build the cliff. Not on purpose, not with malice, but it still stings. And when she voices that sting, she's left with nothing but silence and guilt, because sometimes truth is the loneliest thing you can say. So what do you think? Was the writer justified in calling it out? Or did her frustration eclipse compassion in that final moment? Let us know in the comments, because when politics and personal lives collide, it's never just about who you voted for. It's about who gets caught in the aftermath. Am I the asshole for letting my daughter-in-law's father stay in my home and having my boyfriend break up with me over it? Some breakups happen over betrayal, others over growing apart. But this wasn't about infidelity. It wasn't about shouting matches or secrets. It was about hospitality, family, respect, and pride. Our writer, a woman just trying to hold her household and her heart together, finds herself at the center of a storm she never expected. Let's set the scene. Writer's son, 38, and his wife, writer's daughter-in-law, 39, are living in the basement. Not out of laziness, not because they're freeloaders. They're trying to build something, save up, find their footing in a housing market that seems to punish anyone daring to dream of home ownership. And in this temporary space with one bedroom and a decent-sized living room, they're making it work. Then comes a request. A simple one, really. The daughter-in-law's father, 87 years old, visiting from Poland, just 3 weeks. Could he stay upstairs? Writer looks around. She has rooms, she has space, and more than that, she has empathy. This man is not a stranger. He's family by extension, and he's a human being who has crossed oceans to see his daughter and grandchild. Of course, she says yes, because that's what you do when you have room and when you care. You open your home. That's what family does. But that answer set something off that writer didn't see coming. Her boyfriend, 51 years old. They've been together for 2 years. Not a new fling, not someone still getting to know her habits. 2 full years of companionship. And yet, when he hears that another man, an elderly man, no less, is going to be staying under the same roof, it all comes crashing down. I'm not coming over while he's there. What am I supposed to tell my friends? How does it look, you letting another man stay with you while you're dating me? Let that sink in. This wasn't a man catching her in some compromising situation. This wasn't jealousy sparked by flirting or secrecy. This was an 87-year-old father staying upstairs for a few weeks, and that was enough to end the relationship. So what's really going on here? This wasn't about trust. Not really. It was about control, about appearances, about a man more concerned with how his friends would perceive him than with supporting the woman he claimed to care about. And to make matters worse, when writer tried to point out that this is family, that this is compassion, that this is just basic decency. His response? I don't know anyone else who would do the same. That one line says everything. Not just about him, but about the limits of his empathy. Because most of us do know people who would do the same. Most of us are people who would do the same. When someone's elderly father needs a place to stay, you don't let him book a hotel. You don't turn your back, you open your door and you make room. And now, writer is left reeling, not because she doubts her actions, but because she's been left to wonder if she should have done anything differently. Should she have told her daughter-in-law no? Should she have put her boyfriend's pride above an old man's comfort? She asks, am I the asshole for doing what I thought was right and losing my relationship over it? But the real question buried beneath it all is this. When did kindness become something you had to apologize for? Let's take a breath here. Writer isn't confused about what she did. She's confused about the reaction, and rightfully so, because let's not pretend this was a case of blurred lines. An 87-year-old man isn't a threat to her relationship. He's a guest, a father, a bridge between generations. If anything, writer should be commended for her grace, her strength, the quiet backbone it takes to say yes to family, even if it means saying goodbye to someone who clearly didn't value her heart as much as he claimed. This isn't about one house guest. This is about what it means to be a partner. And writer's boyfriend, he failed the test. He saw an opportunity to be supportive, to show maturity, to respect her decisions, and instead, he chose suspicion, ego, and ultimately, exit. So no, writer, you are not the asshole. You're someone who chose compassion, even when it cost you something. And in the end, maybe that loss isn't as heavy as it feels right now. Because what kind of love can't withstand an old man's visit? What do you think? Was the breakup about more than just the house guest? Or did the boyfriend reveal who he really was the moment kindness clashed with control? Sound off in the comments, because in a world that too often demands coldness, sometimes the boldest move is letting someone in. Am I the asshole for dumping my boyfriend after he expected me to pay for everyone on his birthday? The night was supposed to be about celebration, about laughter, love, and making your person feel appreciated. But somehow, it turned into a moment of humiliation that the writer never saw coming. The writer, a woman who had always been generous, kind, and supportive, was simply trying to show up for her boyfriend on his birthday. She was ready to treat him, to make him feel special. She paid for his cake. She bought him a thoughtful gift. She even planned to cover his dinner. That's already more than many would do. But when the bill arrived at that upscale restaurant, the evening took a sharp, gut punch turn. It was a table of 12, not an intimate gathering, not a small get-together. 12 guests, mostly his friends, his cousins, people the writer didn't even personally invite, people she wasn't even asked to approve of, and the restaurant chosen without her input. She came along to be supportive, not to be the financier of a night she didn't plan. Then came the check, over $600, and without a blink, without a whisper beforehand, the boyfriend turned to her and said, "You've got it, right?" Just like that. Not even a question, a statement in front of everyone. Let that sink in for a moment. Not only was there no prior conversation about splitting or covering the cost, there was an expectation, a public one, that she would foot the entire bill. No warning, no heads up, just that sharp spotlight on her with all eyes shifting toward her as if she were the host. And here's where it cuts deeper. This wasn't about the money. It was about the assumption, the complete disregard for boundaries, the quiet manipulation of public pressure. Because how do you say no without looking like the villain when you're suddenly cornered? Still, the writer handled it with grace. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She calmly, quietly told him she wasn't comfortable paying for everyone. And yet, he accused her of making a scene. That's what abusers of kindness often do. They flip the narrative. He wasn't embarrassed by her refusal. He was embarrassed that his plan to freeload had failed, publicly. Despite that emotional ambush, the writer still paid for his meal. She left money for the cake, and then she left with the kind of silent heartbreak that doesn't need to be loud to hurt. She cried in the Uber. And that visual, it says everything. A woman trying to be kind, punished for having limits. Then came the text. He accused her of embarrassing him. No apology, no accountability, just more guilt-tripping, more manipulation. And when she broke up with him the next day, some of his friends actually messaged her, calling her selfish. Selfish for not being financially exploited? It's moments like these that reveal a person's true character. He didn't see her as a partner. He saw her as a walking wallet, a resource to tap into when it suited him. And when that well dried up, suddenly she was the problem. Let's be clear here. Relationships are built on mutual respect, not one-sided expectations. It's one thing to love someone and occasionally pick up the slack. It's another to be expected to bankroll a luxury dinner for people you didn't invite just to stroke someone else's ego. And that's what this was. Ego, not love. So, is the writer the asshole for breaking up with him? No, she's not the asshole. She's someone who finally chose self-respect over silent sacrifice. She drew a boundary that should have never needed to be drawn. And she walked away not because of the bill, but because of what it represented: entitlement, manipulation, and a total lack of appreciation. To the writer, you weren't being selfish, you were finally being heard by yourself. And to anyone calling her the villain in this story, maybe ask yourself why it bothers you so much that a woman said no to being used. Am I the asshole for wanting to divorce my husband of 17 years because he hit my son? 17 years. 17 years of shared history, raising a family, believing in a bond that had weathered youth, growth, and everything in between. The writer, who entered this marriage at only 18, believed she had found a lifelong partner in Jack. High school sweethearts, parents to 2 children, but somewhere along the way, the love that was supposed to protect turned into something else. Something darker. Now let's talk about Luca. Luca, who isn't the writer's biological son, but is her son in every way that matters. She took him in after a tragedy no child should endure, the loss of both biological parents in a sudden car crash. And she didn't just care for him, She raised him, fought for him, and stood by him. She never denied him his history. She gave him the truth, and more importantly, she gave him love. Luca came out at 12, a vulnerable age. But instead of fear or shame, he found support from the writer. He found the kind of mother many LGBTQ+ teens only dream of. But then there was Jack, whose discomfort with the LGBTQ+ community was always lingering. Quiet, subtle, like a crack under the surface of a glass window. And when Luca began dating Kai, who sounds like a kind, respectful young man, it was only a matter of time before that crack split wide open. Let's pause here. Picture the scene. Luca and Kai, two teenagers, cuddled up on the couch, watching a Disney movie with Luca's 5-year-old sister, Lily. This isn't some wild display of rebellion. This is soft, safe, sweet. It's the kind of scene that, if it were a boy and a girl, no one would bat an eye. But the moment Kai leaves, Jack speaks up. Luca, I don't want you and Kai cuddling like that anymore. No reasoning, no discussion, just control, cloaked in fatherly authority. When Luca asks calmly for clarification, Jack shuts him down with, "Because I said so, I'm your dad." That wasn't parenting, that was posturing. And Luca, wise beyond his years, sensed it. So he withdrew, something many kids do when they're trying to stay respectful, when they know they're walking on emotional eggshells. But it wasn't over. The next day, Jack came home angry, seething, not with work stress, as the writer initially thought, but because his coworkers had seen Luca and Kai kiss at a pride parade. Let that sink in. He wasn't mad because his son was unsafe or in trouble or acting out. He was mad because he was embarrassed. Not because of anything Luca had done wrong, but because his own pride took a hit. And what did Jack do? He demanded Luca's phone. Then, when Luca again calmly asked why, he slapped him. A grown man, a father, hitting a 15-year-old child for existing, for being gay, for kissing his boyfriend. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't parenting. This was violence. Let's not water this down. Jack didn't lash out because he was stressed. He lashed out because Luca challenged the version of fatherhood he had built in his head, a version where obedience was expected and shame was weaponized. The writer did what any decent parent would do. She defended her son. She argued. She stood her ground, but words couldn't undo that slap. And the next day, when Luca didn't come down for breakfast, he was gone. He ran away. That's not something kids do lightly, especially not kids like Luca, who had already experienced loss and abandonment. He ran away because the person who was supposed to protect him hurt him. And then he revealed something even worse. Jack had done something like this before. That means this wasn't an isolated moment of rage. It was a pattern, a festering wound that Luca had been carrying silently, waiting for someone to see it. And now, the writer is sitting in her sister's house, divorce papers in hand, 2 kids by her side, a life about to change forever. But here's the question. Is she the villain for walking away? Her friends say she's overreacting, that Jack was just angry, that it was a mistake. But if hitting your child over a kiss is a mistake, what's next? She made a vow when she married Jack, but she made a promise when she became a mother. That promise was to protect, and protect is exactly what she's doing. Let's be honest. If it had been Lily who was hit, if it had been over something just as trivial, would people still say she was overreacting? Or is it because Luca is adopted? Because he's gay? Because standing up for him means standing against a man people have known longer? To the writer, no, you are not the asshole. You are a mother who drew a line, who said, this ends here. And that is not an act of overreaction. It's an act of courage, of love, of breaking the cycle you once lived through so your children don't have to. This isn't the story of a marriage ending. It's the story of a child being saved. Am I the asshole for telling my family that my sister strongly implied she doesn't want me at her wedding, which led to most of them RSVPing no? Let's begin with this. Weddings are supposed to be about love, celebration, and togetherness, but every now and then they become something else entirely. A stage for unspoken resentment, polished appearances, and carefully curated guest lists. Sometimes it stops being about family and starts becoming about aesthetic. And that's where this story begins. The writer and her sister, 2 people from the same home, the same blood, but clearly 2 different worlds. The writer describes their relationship as complex. And if you've ever had a sibling you love but just can't quite connect with, that word says it all. It's not hostile, it's not fake, it's just layered. Years of tension folded under decades of love. When the sister got engaged, the writer did what most of us would. She put the differences aside. She showed up emotionally. She said the right thing. She wanted to be part of her sister's happiness. When the wedding location was announced, Alberta, a 3 to 4 day drive from where the writer lives, it was a challenge. But she didn't flinch. She didn't complain. She made plans to go. A road trip with a cousin, a commitment to show up, and then the twist came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was subtle, but sharp, like a paper cut across the heart. I totally understand if you don't come. Now that phrase might sound harmless on the surface, polite, even considerate, but there's something passive in it, something loaded. She didn't say, I want you there no matter what. She didn't insist. She didn't ask what it would take to make it easier for the writer to attend. She gave an out, a quiet door to slip through, a suggestion wrapped in sugar. It's okay if you stay away. And the writer? She didn't take the hint. She wanted to be there, so she said I wouldn't miss it for the world. She was willing to drive for days, willing to push through whatever discomfort it took just to stand there on her sister's big day and say, I'm here for you. But then came the phone call that shattered it. She asked about the dress code. Just a simple question, really. A chance to get everything right, to match the tone, to be part of the pictures. Her father had been asked to coordinate colors, so naturally she assumed she would be included too. Why wouldn't she be? And the response? You don't have to worry about that. It's nothing personal. You don't fit the aesthetic. Let that sit for a second. The writer, someone with stretched ears, piercings, and a hand tattoo, was being told she didn't match the wedding's look, that her very existence would clash with the backdrop, that if she showed up, she'd be in some pictures, but not the real ones. Not the ones that would be framed, shared, remembered. Can you imagine how that feels? To love someone so much that you'd cross the country for them and be told your face, your style, yourself isn't welcome in the memory? It broke her. She cried. And for someone who doesn't cry often, you know that meant the pain was real. She told her sister straight up, if you don't want me there, I won't go. There was no protest. No, of course I do. Just silence. And so she backed away. She didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't call the whole family screaming. She sat down for lunch with her grandparents and her uncle. She shared the story, not to turn anyone against her sister, but just to process it, to be heard. But the moment she told them, everything changed. Her grandmother, so upset she cried, said, if you're not welcome, neither are we. And others followed. A domino effect of hurt, of loyalty, of quiet outrage. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all RSVP'd no. And now the writer is sitting in the fallout. Not just heartbroken, but feeling responsible. Like she pulled a string that unraveled the whole thing. Like maybe she should have said nothing at all. And that's where the real question lies. Is she the one who ruined the wedding? Let's be real. This didn't start with the writer. It started with a sister who wanted a wedding day that looked perfect on the outside, even if it meant cutting out the people who didn't fit her curated image. It started with someone valuing aesthetic over family, over love, over inclusion. The writer didn't start this fire. She just revealed the smoke. It wasn't her fault that her family took her side. It wasn't manipulation. It was truth. Painful, yes, but honest. And when people see someone they love being treated like an afterthought, like a blemish on an otherwise clean photo, they react. They protect. They take a stand. The writer didn't sabotage a wedding. She told the truth. And the truth was ugly. What's more heartbreaking here is that all of this could have been avoided. The sister could have simply said, I love you and I want you there. Let's figure it out together. She could have chosen inclusion over image, but she didn't. And now the wedding will still go on, but it will do so without the people who could have made it rich with real love. The family who shows up even when it's hard. The sister who would have driven through mountains just to be there. So no, the writer is not the asshole. She's the one who got told she was too much, too different, too visibly herself for a family photo, and still had the grace to walk away quietly. That's not selfish, that's strength. Am I the asshole for breaking up with my boyfriend after he chose our supposed future kids over me? You know, people talk about love like it's this magical, unstoppable force, that if two people care enough, they'll overcome anything. But what happens when the obstacle isn't a job or distance or even infidelity? What happens when it's the idea of someone who doesn't even exist yet? Because that's what this story is about. Not a person, not a betrayal, but a hypothetical child. The writer, a 21-year-old woman, has been in a relationship with her boyfriend, 22, for 4 years. That's not a fling. That's not just dating. That's growing up together. It's building a shared vision of a future, or at least trying to. And for 4 years, they've been trying to make it work, even as this one recurring issue kept surfacing like a crack in the foundation. Kids. Now, the writer has always been iffy on the topic. She's not anti-kid. She's not issuing ultimatums. She's simply unsure. Like many people in their early 20s who are still figuring out who they are, let alone what kind of parent they might become. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, he's always been firm. He wants kids. It's not negotiable. And this difference has been a quiet but constant strain on their relationship. Still, they made the classic move. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Spoiler alert, they got to it. This past Saturday, the conversation popped up again. At first, it was just talk, future stuff, dreams, maybe, but then it turned. Her boyfriend got serious. He said that without kids, life would feel pointless to him, that he'd grow to resent her if she didn't give him that part of his future. Resent her. That word hits different when it's coming from someone who's supposed to love you, someone you've supported, someone you've seen vulnerable. Suddenly, it's not a discussion, it's a countdown to failure. Now, let's pause for a second. The writer didn't shut him down. She didn't dismiss his feelings. She met him halfway. She acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, her mind would change. She's young, she's growing. She said maybe one day she'd feel ready. She shared her uncertainties, not as a warning, but as honesty. And for a moment, he seemed okay with that. But then changed the rules. Suddenly he tells her that if she doesn't give him kids, he'll leave her, just like that. Not because she hurt him, not because of betrayal, but because she might not fulfill the dream of future children someday. Let that sink in. Not their kids, just kids. Any kids. As if the woman beside him, the one who's been there for 4 years, was just a means to a family, not part of the family itself. The writer was blindsided. She thought he wanted a life with her, that the kids were part of their story, not the whole story, that he would see her perspective the way she had considered his. Instead, she got an ultimatum, and when she expressed disappointment, just as he had earlier, he flipped the script, called her selfish. That was the moment. The crack turned into a collapse. So she did what many wouldn't have had the strength to do. She walked away. Right there, in the middle of that painful conversation, she ended the relationship, and they haven't spoken since. And now she's wondering, was she wrong? Was she the selfish one? Was she the asshole for leaving someone who chose imaginary children over the very real woman in front of him? Let's talk about that. Because no, this isn't about kids. It's about values. It's about identity. It's about respect. The writer never said she'd never have children. She said she wasn't sure. And instead of navigating that unknown together, her boyfriend essentially said, "You'd better become what I want, or I'll find someone who will." That's not love. That's a contract with shifting terms. And here's the harsh truth most people don't want to hear. You can love someone and still not be compatible. You can care deeply and still not belong in each other's futures. And when you try to force a square peg into a round hole, it's not compromise. It's a slow erosion of who you are. The writer chose herself. She didn't choose to end a relationship over kids. She ended a relationship with someone who told her she wasn't enough unless she gave him what he wanted. And maybe the most heartbreaking part is that she wasn't even saying no. She was saying not yet, but that wasn't good enough. So is she the asshole? No. She's a young woman who showed emotional maturity, who listened, who tried, who was honest. And when it became clear that honesty wasn't welcome, she left. That's not being an asshole. That's being brave. And maybe, just maybe, she saved herself years of slow resentment, years of forcing herself into a life she wasn't sure she wanted, Years of being seen not as a partner, but as a path to someone else's dream. It hurts. Of course it does. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from someone who's already halfway out the door because they've chosen a fantasy over your reality. Am I the asshole for turning up at the house my partner's car was at when he told me he was going somewhere else? You know that feeling when something just doesn't sit right? Not full-blown suspicion, not even paranoia, just a gut instinct, a subtle twist in your chest that whispers, something's off. That's where the writer was. Just another ordinary evening, trusting her partner of 3 years. 3 years when he told her he was headed to his buddy's house. A guy the writer knew, a place she'd been. There was no reason to doubt him, no warning sign, just trust. But trust doesn't mean much when the math doesn't add up. Because 2 hours later, that quiet evening was shattered by a simple message from a friend. Who does he know who lives on street name? Now pause for a second. Let that settle in, because those kinds of texts, they change the air around you. They light up every survival instinct you've ever buried under the word love. The writer responded honestly. She had no idea. As far as she knew, her partner didn't know anyone on that street. So what was his car doing there? That's the moment her heart stopped whispering and started screaming. Now here's where some might judge. This is the part where people toss out terms like psycho behavior, right? But let's be real for a moment. Who among us in that same moment wouldn't want the truth? The writer didn't send a rage-filled text. She didn't start a fight over the phone. She didn't even confront him immediately. She just got in her car and went to see with her own eyes. Why? Because sometimes when your heart's about to be broken, your brain steps aside. Logic leaves the building and all you're left with is the ache of needing proof. And she got it. The car? It was there. No doubt. That was his car. And what did she do? She didn't march up to the house and cause a scene. She sat down the street. She still gave him a chance, texted him casually, asking if he was having a good time, and he lied. Instantly, said he was building a PC with his friend. Said it with confidence. No hesitation. That lie, it's what did it. That's when she walked to the door, knocked, and a woman answered. The look on the woman's face said everything. No confusion. No, can I help you? Just that stunned silence. The kind of silence that comes from knowing you've been caught, not by a stranger, but by the person who's been left in the dark for God knows how long. And what did the writer do? She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't explode. She simply said, tell him his shit will be on my front lawn when he wants to come and get it. Cold, calm, devastating. And then she left. But the story doesn't end there. No, the heartbreak always has a second act. An hour later, he came home, not remorseful, not apologetic, not even confused. He came in angry. He called her crazy, said she was out of line, accused her of being a psycho for showing up where he lied about being. Let that sink in. He cheated, lied, got caught, and then tried to flip the script to make her feel like she was the problem. And even then, even in that moment of emotional warfare, the writer didn't retaliate with violence. She quietly began gathering his things. She was packing up the life they built together, folding it piece by piece. That takes strength most people don't talk about. He tried to stop her, got in her face, demanded she stop. And that's when she broke. Not violently, not irrationally, just humanly. She shoved him away, cried, told him to take his stuff and leave, locked herself in a room because it was the only safe space she had left in her own home. The silence that followed was louder than any fight. He took some things, clothes, toiletries, and left. Not a single message since. Not a single attempt to explain. And now the writer's sitting with all of it. The betrayal. The guilt. The question echoing in her mind. Was I the asshole for going to that house? And here's the truth. Plain and clear. No, absolutely not. This isn't a case of stalking or obsession or psycho behavior. This is a woman who trusted her partner, who was given reason, real, tangible reason to question where he was, who handled the truth with more grace than most would be capable of in the same situation. If anything, this post is a masterclass in restraint. She didn't damage property. She didn't humiliate anyone. She didn't even demand answers. She simply ended the lie, quietly, directly, powerfully. So no, the writer isn't the asshole. She's the only one in the story who kept it real. The only one who faced the truth, responded with dignity, and walked away with her integrity intact, even while her heart was breaking. Am I the asshole for not bringing my niece shopping after she was extremely rude and mean to me, even if she apologized? Let's be honest. Kindness is a fragile thing, especially when it comes from someone who's trying to be the fun adult in a young person's life. The writer, in this case, wasn't some seasoned parent or a teacher hardened by years of teenage sass. She was just an aunt, trying to connect, trying to bond, trying to be the kind of adult that a kid remembers fondly, not because of discipline or punishment or authority, but because of shared memories, little adventures, and safe space. But one cruel sentence can shatter all of that. So here's how it unfolded. The writer had been regularly spending time with her 13-year-old niece, Gabby. Sweet outings, one-on-one attention, a sincere effort to build a relationship. No obligation, just genuine care. Then one day they're at the park. Nothing special, just two people enjoying a moment together. And the writer, trusting that bond, shares a bit of excitement about an upcoming event. She's going with her boyfriend. She's picked out a dress. She even shows a picture. It's a personal thing, a soft, vulnerable thing. And Gabby responds with, "That's so ugly. You look really fat. Isn't your boyfriend gonna think it's bad?" 13 or not, that cuts deep. This wasn't playful teasing. It wasn't clumsy wording. This was sharp, deliberate cruelty. And it came from someone the writer had only ever been kind to. Now, pause there. Imagine being the writer in that moment. You're standing there, hearing those words from a kid you've cared about, invested in, and suddenly you're questioning not just your outfit, but your worth. You're not just hurt, you're blindsided. Sure, she's 13, but 13 is old enough to know that saying someone looks fat and ugly is meant to hurt. It wasn't a toddler's accidental insult. It was a loaded comment, one that went right for the insecurities. And let's not ignore the bigger layer. The comment also dragged the writer's boyfriend into it, as if her looks were somehow not just bad, but shameful. That kind of remark doesn't come out of nowhere. When the writer brought this up to her sister, Gabby's mom, she did the responsible thing, promised to talk to Gabby. A few days later, Gabby came to apologize. But let's be real, apologies without sincerity are just noise. Gabby showed up with eye rolls, a grumpy face, and bare minimum words. No remorse. No emotion. Just a performance, probably coached 5 minutes before walking through the door. And even then, the writer showed grace. She accepted the apology for what it was, said thank you, and asked them to leave. No yelling, no drama, just quiet disappointment. And the thing is, the writer didn't go on a mission to punish her niece. She didn't badmouth her to the family. She simply withdrew, took a step back, decided that someone who insulted her deeply and didn't show real remorse didn't get to go on fun outings anymore. Because, let's face it, emotional safety matters. And the shopping trip? That wasn't a favor. It wasn't owed. It was something the writer looked forward to, a gift, an experience. And that excitement? It was gone. Fast forward to Mother's Day at the writer's mom's house. Gabby, clearly expecting things to go back to normal, asks when they'll go shopping. She thinks an apology, even a half-hearted one, should be enough. When the writer says they're not going anymore, Gabby breaks down. But I said I was sorry. That's when the writer gave a lesson that many adults haven't even learned. Saying sorry doesn't mean the hurt is erased. You have to show you've changed, and you haven't. A fair point. A very human response. But here comes the backlash. Now the family, the mom, the sister, starts in. They say the writer is beefing with a child, that she's expecting adult behavior from a kid, that she's punishing someone who already said sorry. The tone shifts from support to subtle blame. And that's the real kicker in the story, because the writer isn't asking for perfection. She isn't demanding groveling or obedience. She's just protecting her own peace. She's saying, if I can't trust this relationship to be safe, I'm stepping back. And yet, she's the one being told she's overreacting. Let's be clear, this isn't a war against a child. This isn't vengeance. It's consequence. And here's the most important part. Gabby is watching. She's learning. Whether the adults realize it or not, this moment will shape how she handles relationships in the future. If she sees that a half-hearted apology magically fixes everything, she'll never learn accountability. But if she sees that actions matter more than words, that apologies need to be real, she might grow into someone who thinks twice before she cuts people with careless remarks. And maybe doesn't become a bully. So is the writer the asshole? No, absolutely not. She's not beefing with a child. She's setting a boundary. She's teaching through action that love is real, but so is respect. And when that respect is broken, there are consequences. That's not cruelty. That's maturity. And while her family might not see it yet, someday, maybe Gabby will. Am I the asshole for teaching about melanin, and now my client is mad at me? This story starts in a place you might not expect, a church nursery. The writer is only 16 years old, just a teen. But already, he's chosen to spend his time doing something kind, something meaningful, volunteering at a Methodist church's nursery program. And if you've ever worked with children, you know they ask big questions. Honest questions. The kind of questions that make adults squirm, not because the kids are wrong, but because the world has made those topics feel taboo. So here's what happened. 2 children, one black, one white, probably no older than 4. Sitting there in the innocence of a Sunday morning, they look at each other, and one of them asks, "Why do we look different?" Now pause for a moment. That's not a question about politics. That's not a question about race theory. That's a child noticing reality in the purest, most unfiltered way. And in that moment, the writer, young but thoughtful, decided to answer it truthfully. No agenda, no lecture, just science. He explained melanin, a basic explanation of how our skin color is determined by genetics. No judgment, no ideology, just facts. And the children, they listened. They didn't spiral into existential dread. They didn't feel alienated or confused. They took it in, like kids do, and went home excited to share what they'd learned. But that's when everything changed. The black family, they were grateful. They thanked the writer. They saw what he did for what it was, an empowering moment. A thoughtful way to explain difference without shame or division. The white family, furious. They accused the writer, again a 16-year-old volunteer, of teaching critical race theory to a 4-year-old, as if the simple act of explaining skin tone was suddenly political, as if acknowledging difference is somehow dangerous. Let's be clear, the writer wasn't preaching. He wasn't trying to convert anyone to a worldview. He just answered a child's question with truth and clarity. And yet, now he's left feeling like maybe he crossed a line. Maybe he did something wrong. Because when adults respond with anger, especially when you're young, it shakes you. That's where the fear creeps in. Did I overstep? Was I out of line? Did I accidentally cause harm? And that right there is the emotional heart of this post. Because this wasn't about a lesson on melanin. This was about a teenager trying to do the right thing and being made to feel like he might have done something wrong, simply for being honest. But thankfully, this story has someone else, a steady voice in the storm, the writer's pastor. The writer sent an email, worried, anxious, looking for clarity. And the pastor, he backed him completely, said he'd be the one to handle the parents if they brought it up again, said he'd explain basic genetic sciences himself. And in that moment, the writer was reminded he wasn't alone, because telling the truth with kindness and simplicity shouldn't be controversial. And you know what else? That white child who heard about melanin, that kid just got handed a quiet, gentle seed of understanding. That difference isn't bad, that there's a reason for the colors of our skin, that our bodies are made this way, and that's okay. That child didn't hear a political debate, they heard science. And maybe that small conversation will be a brick in the foundation of a kinder, more open-minded future. So, is the writer the asshole for answering an honest question with an honest answer? No, he's not. He didn't teach hate. He didn't teach division. He taught science to a child who wanted to understand the world they live in. That doesn't make him dangerous. That makes him responsible. And honestly, at 16, showing that kind of awareness, empathy, and courage, that's something more adults should aspire to. Am I the asshole for telling a stranger to f off and mind her own business? Let's set the scene. The writer, age 50, lives with an invisible battle. A battle that doesn't show on the outside, but one that absolutely rages on the inside. You wouldn't know it just by looking at them. No cane, no wheelchair, but every step costs energy. Every movement wears them down. And what's more, this isn't just any illness. The writer is preparing to travel across the country just to get on the heart transplant list. We're talking life or death territory. This isn't about comfort, this is about survival. But on this particular day, the writer wasn't in a hospital. They were at a car dealership doing something incredibly normal, getting an oil change, something small, something routine, a quiet moment in a life that, frankly, hasn't had many of those lately. And then she appeared. The stranger. The kind of person who believes they've got a badge that says public behavior police. The kind who thinks that her judgment is more important than your reality. She sees the writer's disability tag, and something inside her just can't help herself. She walks up, not politely, not kindly, but with that fake sweet tone wrapped in arrogance and entitlement. Why do you have a disability tag? You're clearly not disabled. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't curiosity. This isn't concern. This is the assumption that if you don't look sick, you must be lying. The kind of mindset that makes life hell for people with chronic illness. The kind that reduces a person's entire experience down to what a stranger can see with their own two eyes. Now the writer, they tried to diffuse, gave her nothing, just said, "Don't worry about it," and went back to their phone. That should have been the end of it. But no, she pushes. "I asked you a question, answer it." Like the writer owes her anything, like she's the judge, the jury, and the medical board all in one. And that's when the writer snapped. With every ounce of dignity, frustration, exhaustion, and buried emotion, they turned to her and said, "Do we know each other? No? Then mind your own business and off." Boom. Simple, direct, deserved. But of course, this is a public place. Other people are sitting in the waiting room, and wouldn't you know it, some of them thought the writer was rude. They actually suggested the writer should have explained themselves. That they owed this stranger, who barged in with an accusation, a lesson. And that's the twisted part, isn't it? When you're sick but don't look sick, people expect you to perform your pain just to be believed. They want you to prove it, to show your scars, to explain the unexplainable, just to be treated with basic decency. But here's the truth, the writer doesn't owe anyone their story. Not in a waiting room. Not to a nosy stranger, not to people who assume being polite means accepting disrespect. This wasn't about the language used. It was about setting a boundary, a line in the sand, a declaration. I do not exist for your comfort, your curiosity, or your approval. And let's talk about that disability placard. Do people really believe those are handed out like coupons? You have to go through doctors, paperwork, evaluations. No one gets one just for fun. It exists for a reason, and just because someone's condition is invisible doesn't mean it isn't real. The writer lives with heart failure. They are preparing for a transplant, and yet, even with that, they're still being questioned, still being made to feel like they have to justify their existence. So, was the writer the asshole? No, absolutely not. What the writer did wasn't about being rude, it was about protecting themselves from judgment, from shame, from the emotional labor of having to constantly explain a pain that most people couldn't begin to understand. In that moment, the writer didn't just tell a stranger to back off. They stood up for every person with an invisible illness who's ever been side-eyed, whispered about, or straight up interrogated for not looking sick enough. And that takes strength. The kind of strength you can't always see. But that doesn't mean it's not there. Am I the asshole for insisting my ex-wife and I stick to our court-ordered custody agreement? Let's step into a world many know too well, but few speak openly about. Divorce, custody, shared parenting. On paper, it's all legal language and black and white agreements. But in reality, it's a battlefield of blurred boundaries, raw emotions, and the exhausting struggle to put your kids first when the adults can barely be civil. The writer, now in their 30s, has been divorced for almost 5 years. 5 long years of trying to maintain structure, fairness, and balance for the sake of the children they love. The custody agreement, it's clear, a 50-50 split. 7 days on, 7 days off. And then some extras, Mother's Day and her birthday go to the mom, Father's Day and his birthday go to the writer. Sounds simple, right? Fair, even. Decided by a court, no less. But here's the twist. Ever since the writer's ex-wife remarried, things have changed. Slowly at first, subtly, then more direct, more demanding. She married a man in his 40s, and ever since then, she's been trying to chip away at the boundaries the court put in place. Can I have them for a few extra days? We're traveling to see his family. Let me take them just one more day. It's his birthday. How about Father's Day with him too? And each time, the writer stands firm, respectfully, steadily, firmly. Stick to the order. Stick to the boundaries, because when those lines get blurred, they almost never get redrawn evenly. But of course, boundaries don't sit well with everyone, especially not with people who are used to getting their way. The writer explains it clearly. They're not trying to keep the kids away from anyone, but they also know the one time they did try to compromise, the ex-wife didn't even want to talk about making up the missed time. That's not co-parenting, that's taking. And when someone shows you they're not interested in fairness, how can you trust them to play by the rules? Now, it's not just about extra days or birthday parties anymore. Recently, there was a family baptism, her new baby with her new husband, and it happened to fall on the writer's custody week. So naturally, she wanted the older kids too. But again, that's not how custody works. She called it unfair. The writer reminded her, you can plan around the schedule just like I do. That's not cruelty, that's consistency. But what does she do? She escalates, throws insults, calls the writer names, claims he's trying to tear apart a family, paints him as the villain in a story where he's just following the court's script. And it didn't stop with her. At a school event, of all places, her new husband walks up to the writer and to his face calls him a for not giving in. Imagine that. A grown man in front of school staff lashing out like a schoolyard bully. And he paid the price, escorted out for his behavior. But let's take a step back. The writer isn't denying his kids time with their extended family. He's asking that the structure stay intact, because once you start handing over days without discussion, without reciprocity, it becomes a slippery slope. And guess who usually gets burned in those situations? Not the person asking for more time. It's the parent trying to hold things together while being painted as cold-hearted. And the kids, they're caught in the middle, hearing one side complain that dad's not letting them go, maybe even being told he's the reason they missed a baptism, when in truth, the only reason they missed it was because their mom didn't plan ahead during her parenting time. Let's call it what it is: emotional manipulation disguised as family values. Here's the thing. Co-parenting is not easy. It requires maturity, communication, and respect for boundaries. And when one side refuses to play fair, the court order becomes the only shield you've got. So, is the writer the asshole for sticking to the rules? For refusing to bend when bending comes with no guarantee of fairness? Absolutely not. He's not being inflexible. He's being responsible. Because kids need consistency. They need both parents to respect each other's time and roles. And in this story, it's the writer who's actually doing that while being painted as the enemy. He's not saying the kids shouldn't love their stepdad. He's not saying they can't celebrate with their mom's side. He's saying, plan it when you have them. That's not sabotage, that's structure. And to the stepdad who called him a name, that wasn't strength, that was ego. That was a man who thought bullying someone in a school hallway made him a protector, when in reality, it just exposed how little he understands about respect, co-parenting, and what it means to actually put children first. Final verdict? No. The writer is not the asshole. He's a father trying to protect the time, structure, and emotional stability of his children. He's already sacrificed enough. And if following the court's orders makes him the villain in someone else's story, so be it. Because sometimes being the bad guy in someone else's narrative just means you're the only one actually playing by the rules. Am I the asshole for taking away my dad's girlfriend's keys after she tried to send me to bed? Let's talk about boundaries, about grief, About someone stepping so far out of line, you don't even know how to respond because you're too busy wondering who in the world gave them that much audacity. The writer, a 21-year-old college student, is home for the summer with their 23-year-old brother. Their uncle has full custody of their younger siblings, 12 and 10, and since he's away for work, the household's been running on sibling power alone. That's nothing new. This family has been self-sufficient for years, especially after losing their mother. Their father, he was absent for most of their lives, thanks to a history of problem drinking. Estranged, unreliable, and a source of deep wounds that no reconnection can neatly fix. Recently, though, he's been trying to worm his way back in, sober apparently, and bringing with him a girlfriend who is deeply convinced she's starring in her own Hallmark movie. Let's be clear, this woman, who's in her 30s, has been dating Ryder's father for maybe 4 months, but she's around more than he is. Constantly inserting herself, acting like a stepmom, fawning over the kids, and talking down to Ryder like they're 10. She was given a house key by the uncle only because she occasionally helped pick up the younger siblings from school. That's it. That was the extent of the trust. She didn't earn a role. She was filling in for the carpool line. Then came dinner. An awkward, uncomfortable dinner where dad makes a wildly inappropriate joke, one that takes aim at their late mother. And this woman, the girlfriend, has the nerve to co-sign it with her own ugly little comment. Let that sink in. Not just disrespectful, but vicious. Ryder and their siblings keep it together, see them out, and try to process it privately. Even give their uncle the heads up. But clearly, that wasn't the end. The next afternoon, Ryder returns home with the younger siblings and finds her, the girlfriend, already inside. She'd let herself in for the first time when no one else was home. That already feels off. She launches into this awkward apology, not for herself, but on behalf of Dad, because he's too ashamed to show his face. Ryder tries to keep it civil, explains the line that was crossed and how it wasn't okay. And how does this woman respond? She laughs, dismisses the concern, patronizes Ryder again with that fake sweet voice like they're playing house and she's the lead. And then comes the moment that really pushes everything off the cliff. It's late. The younger kids are watching TV. It's almost bedtime. The girlfriend suddenly turns into a drill sergeant. Okay, my dears, time for bed. And the kids, they look to Ryder, silently asking, is this woman serious? They go, mostly because it's bedtime anyway. But the girlfriend doesn't stop there. Ryder is cleaning up in the kitchen when she looks up and says, you too, hon. I mean, pause right there. Imagine being 21, in your own home, busting your back all summer to hold down the fort, and some woman you barely tolerate decides it's time for you to go to bed like you're a toddler. Ryder gives her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's a joke. But no, she doubles down. It's getting late. Time for bed. What? Ryder rightfully tells her to pack it up and go home. And what does this woman do? Laughs again. Says things like, it's so cute when teenagers try to act like adults. Accuses Ryder of being rebellious. Claims they're having a hissy fit. And then, the cherry on top, as she heads off to the bathroom, she mutters that Dad says Ryder is frigid little priss. There's so much wrong in that moment, you almost can't decide what to focus on. The betrayal from her repeating something so cruel, the fact that she's weaponizing the term frigid like this is 1952, the blatant disrespect. Ryder, boiling with quiet rage, makes a decision. They walk over to her bag, locate her giant keyring, and remove the house key. Just like that. Silent. Clean. Done. She leaves later, completely unaware. But the next day, oh, the text messages. The girlfriend is panicking, accusing Ryder of stealing, calling them a brat, threatening to go to their uncle and brothers. Ryder, calm as ever, lets her know. You want to talk? Call me at 4. Until then, stop clogging the inbox. But the girlfriend spirals further, claims the younger siblings are her kids too, that taking away her key is unsafe. What? Ryder finally sends the last word. She's been disrespectful, dismissive, and condescending from the start, and the odds of getting that key back, slim to none. Eventually, the uncle calls. He's already laughing. Because he knows Ryder, knows they don't cause drama for fun, knows they've carried more weight than most adults ever do. Ryder explains what happened, how she tried to send them to bed and called them a priss. The uncle loses it laughing. The brothers, same thing. One of them even says he's surprised Ryder didn't knock her out. She's out of the picture now. No more picking up the kids, no more letting herself in. No more weird attempts at cosplay motherhood. If she wants to be around, it has to be with dad, and only when the oldest brother is supervising. And here's the heart of it. Ryder doesn't think the girlfriend is evil, just wildly out of line, delusional about her role, and completely unwilling to earn trust the way anyone else would, through respect, communication, and time. The stepmom act? Hollow. If she just treated Ryder and the siblings with basic decency, none of this would have happened. But instead, she treated a 21-year-old who was holding their family together like a child, and got reminded firmly what happens when you disrespect someone who's been forced to grow up far too soon. So, am I the asshole? No, not even close. Title, Am I the Asshole? For asking my fiance's relatives to pay for themselves after they brought uninvited guests to our pre-wedding dinner. So, the writer, a 30-year-old man, is on the cusp of one of life's most celebrated milestones, marriage. The kind of chapter where things are supposed to feel joyful, hopeful, and like everyone around you is just as invested in making it special. And yet, somehow, the drama creeps in before the vows are even exchanged. The writer and his fiancée, 29F, had planned a modest but meaningful pre-wedding dinner. Not a grand affair, just an intimate evening with close family and a couple wedding party friends. 14 people total. 14 confirmed, counted, called in guests. Everything was squared away. You know that feeling? When you do everything right to make something go smoothly, and still chaos shows up fashionably late? They arrive at the restaurant, and suddenly her side strolls in with 4 extra people, just like that. A cousin and his wife, who, surprise, were just visiting anyway, her sister's boyfriend, and here's the curveball, his teenage daughter. That last one hits weird, right? It's not a bring your kid kind of gathering, like it's an adults-only, soft start to the wedding kind of night dinner. But apparently no one told that to her relatives. Now the staff, bless them, were trying their best. Rearranging tables, reshuffling place settings, everyone's doing the awkward half smiles, pretending this is normal. The writer and his fiancée are left apologizing to the servers like they caused the inconvenience. And yeah, maybe it's not a disaster, but it throws off the vibe. Still, they settle in. Dinner unfolds. The food's good, conversation flows, there's wine, there's laughter. On the surface, it's a pleasant evening. But then, the check arrives. And that's when the quiet tension that's been humming underneath everything suddenly gets louder. The bill? Over $850. That's nearly $200 more than the writer and his fiancée budgeted for. And let's be honest, dinners like this aren't cheap even when everything goes according to plan. So the writer, keeping things discreet, quietly asks the server to split off the uninvited guests' meals. He covers the 14 they agreed on. The rest, he leaves for the tag-alongs to handle. And honestly, who can blame him? No big announcement, no drama at the table, just a silent message, you weren't invited so you don't get a free ride. But apparently, silence wasn't enough. Later, the fiancée tells the writer she was embarrassed, that he could have let it go for one night. That making her family pay made them feel unwelcome, like it was some kind of power move about money. Now pause here, because this is where things get complicated. You see, weddings aren't just about 2 people. They're about families, cultures, expectations. And when you start putting money, boundaries, and unspoken resentments in the same room, someone's going to walk out with hurt feelings. The writer argues that he didn't want to sweep it under the rug, that it mattered, that they made plans together and those plans were ignored. And that is such a crucial point. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect, about boundaries, about saying, hey, this is our thing. Please treat it like it matters. But to his fiancée, it wasn't just a dinner, it was a test of how they as a couple handle unexpected situations. And in her eyes, he failed. So now things are off. Not explosive, just tense. That weird emotional silence where you're still in the same room, but everything feels colder. Update. The writer later shares that things didn't blow up exactly. There was a talk, uncomfortable but not dramatic. Her relatives sent him texts trying to smooth it over. They didn't mean to cause trouble. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they truly thought it was fine to bring a few extra folks along. But here's the thing. Good intentions don't cancel out bad behavior. His fiancée, though, still seems distant. She says she needs time to think about how we handle stuff as a couple. And that sentence? That stings. Because now the writer is not just wondering if he was in the wrong about the bill, he's questioning how this moment might affect the foundation of his marriage. So, am I the asshole? Let's break this down. No, writer, you are not the asshole. You didn't scream. You didn't embarrass anyone in public. You didn't even ask them to leave. You just asked people who weren't invited and who added real cost to your night to pay for their own food. That's not rude. That's respectful of your own planning and your own wallet. But here's the caveat. This isn't just about right or wrong. It's about communication styles. It's about emotional temperature, about how two people react to chaos, and whether they can stay on the same team when things go sideways. If your fiancé sees boundary enforcement as a threat instead of a strength, that's something you two need to figure out now before vows get involved. Still, your tone was calm, your response measured. If this dinner turned into a stress test for the relationship, you held your ground. Now, the real question is, can your fiancé stand beside you when you do? That's where we leave things, for now.